Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to our 4th episode in our weekly series for featured build discussions. This week we are featuring Pimmalage's Spectral Shield Throw Deadeye. This particular build allows you to take on the immersive role of pretending you are Captain America and destroying the entirety of the Path of Exile gameplay and monsters that stand in between you and the glory of smashing things with your shield. One of the things that caught my eye about this particular build is how well it's written and composed, and the feedback and the update that Pimmalage has put in for the 3.9 balance changes is nothing short of impressive. So I would highly recommend that you stay tuned. We've got gameplay, we've got gem links, we've got itemization, and of course we've got the skill tree that we're going to go over. Those of you who are wondering where exactly my slightly balding forehead is at, well, long story short, went into the optometrist today and my eyes are dilated and larger than the great eye of Sauron himself. For those of you who are looking for timestamps, they are placed above Sauron's great eye in the video description. They are hot linked along with all of the various links for this particular build, including the forum posting that we'll be going through, as well as the path of building that we will be featuring. Now, a lot of folks want to see gameplay right from the get-go, so let's take a look at Pimmalage's version of his Spectral Shield Throw as it takes on a Tier 16 Minotaur map. This particular build can go through this entire map in under 2 minutes, and it is absolutely insane to see the chaining of the Spectral Shield Throw as it goes from pack to pack. Here's a Legion, and this is just so dang satisfying to see him go from spot to spot on the Legion and how everything simply explodes with a few shots of his Spectral Shield Throw. Now, of course, he's got a whole bunch of different uptimes on his auras and on his flasks that are all going to be helping contribute to his damage on this particular build. So if you are looking for a build that can maximize its mechanics between flasks, between auras, and of course between a passive tree and between itemization, I think this is a really great example of this particular build. And of course, towards the end of the video, he goes on and blows up the Minotaur. I'm going to go right here and give Pimmalage a little subscribe and ding the bell to be notified for all of his future updates. So over to the particularities of this build. There are lots of Spectral Shield Throw builds out there. This one chooses to take on the form of a Deadeye, and this was originally built for Legion League, but with 3.9 coming, I thought it would be important for us to highlight this in our featured build discussion portion of the video because it's 3.9 League. So if you want updated thoughts and are wondering, yeah, but is Spectral Shield Throw going to be any good in 3.9 with the various changes that are happening, including the changes to point blank? Pimmalage simply tells us, yes, there are going to be some slight nerfs if you've played Spectral Shield Throw from the past. It's not going to be quite as strong as what it used to be, but if you haven't played Spectral Shield Throw in the past, then you're really missing out because there's a lot of incredibly fun times to be had as you are playing this particular build. It can level great, it can map great, and it can boss great, and there's a lot of flexibility built into this particular build. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking at playing this for 3.9, that you check out Pimmalage's particular thoughts. Some pros and cons of this particular build. It's an extremely versatile build. As you read through the guide yourself, you will note through the more than 15 pages of particular commentary and questions and feedback that are provided that there are lots of different ways you can build Spectral Shield Throw, and that's one of the great things about the build for Pimmalage's version. He's actually pillaged. Pimmalage has pillaged? Say that 10 times fast. He has pillaged several other different ideas and concepts and really combined them all together to give a versatile template for other players to mess around with, build off of, and then adapt for themselves. So it's a very versatile build that gives you a lot of options to go either glass cannon or you can invest heavily in defenses. Also, this is a pretty low floor in terms of gear requirements, with really only a couple of things that make the entire build really come together. And so it means that you could play it on a relatively low budget, even early in a league, like right now while we are early into 3.9, and not a whole lot of people are screaming for items and for various amounts of currency to be dumped into a Spectral shield throw build. So now would be the time, or a perfect time, to get items for this particular build. Of course, there are some cons. I always love it when we're able to feature builds from players who are open and honest and transparent about the cons to their build. No build is perfect. At some point in time, you're going to try out a build, whether it's recommended here at Good Guy Gaming or if it's recommended somewhere else. And sometimes you're just going to walk away from the build less than satisfied. And so having a succinct but also thorough list of cons to a build is incredibly essential for making a choice before you dump a whole bunch of hours into something. Right at the top of his list for cons, the build, while practical, it isn't anything to brag about in terms of its defenses. This isn't the most tanky build, and conversely, it's also not going to be the most damaging build. If you just want big DPS numbers in Path of Building, or you just want to never, ever, ever die, this build probably isn't for you. If you're looking for something that's versatile, that's fun to play, that can map, and that can boss, then this is going to be right up your alley. There's a whole bunch of videos here, so I would highly recommend that you check those out as you are looking for more particularities and maybe more of a taste of the build, of a visual taste for the build, if you are interested in playing it. So a couple of things to note here about the gear before we jump into the passive tree. This particular shield is just a massive, massive shield. When you are playing Spectral shield throw, you want a lot of your damage to come off of your shield. What a shock. You're using your shield as a throwable weapon. So this means that you want to scale as much armor as possible onto this shield, and this particular shield is absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to be very, very difficult to come anywhere close to these armor totals now. However, don't worry about it. Pimmalage actually gives us a guide and a walkthrough of exactly how to craft a shield that will get you in between 2300 and 2800 armor, which is perfectly fine for clearing the entirety of the game. So you're going to want to dump some currency and some investment and maybe even some theory crafting time into how exactly you're going to craft an endgame shield for you that is going to take you throughout the game as you engage with various levels of content. This particular type of scepter, of course, is really, really tough to get nowadays, with getting lots and lots of damage as extra damage after everything's been converted. It's just a whole bunch of extra damage. But again, this was basically legacy gear that he was using in Legion at the top end. And even if you don't get this style of gear, I would just encourage you, this is like top end game style of gear. Pimmalage does a great job of showing us how to get there, how to get from A to B, how to level, rather than just saying, hey, here's my amazing legacy style DPS gear, and if you can't reach it, then the build is going to stink for you. We'd mentioned flasks earlier while we were looking at his gameplay footage. This is an Adziri's Promise build that is very, very friendly. You're going to want to try and get as high a roll as you can possibly get on Adziri's Promise, and you're also going to look for a taste of hate, mostly because there's a whole bunch of extra physical damage as extra cold damage during the Taste of Hate's effect, which we are scaling up and converting a whole bunch of our damage, namely at peak performance 100% of our physical damage to cold damage, which adds a whole bunch of additional damage for this build in the way we scale. Now, when we talk about things getting a little bit more expensive and the things that are required to make this particular build tick, of course, this is going to be your top end item, which is going to be a Watcher's Eye that you can use either Wrath or Hatred, but really you're looking for that Hatred mod if you can. It's nice if you can get the Wrath mod if you don't want to go full-on conversion. If you'd like to do some lightning damage and you really don't care about doing full-on conversion. But if you're able to get full-on conversion, then this is going to be the way to go with a Hatred Watcher's Eye. This particular jewel, the Viridian Jewel Divide and Conquer, is the unique that makes this particular build tick. So while you have 40 total dexterity and strength in the radius, please note, not while it is allocated in radius, just while it's in the radius, Spectral Shield Throw will chain 4+ times. plus 4 times means that every individual throw that you've got, that's 4 additional chains in addition to whatever other chains that you've got going on, which means a ton of damage coming off of your Spectral shield throw. It is a fantastic threshold jewel, and it's incredibly cheap in League, whether that's softcore or hardcore. Let's take a look at his passive tree over here in Path of Building. Now, over on the right-hand side, this is where he goes and grabs Divide and Conquer. That's where he puts his particular version. You can see that, again, you don't need to have a whole bunch of various stats allocated in this region. You just need to have dexterity and strength in the radius. You don't need to allocate them. Now, in terms of his ascendancies, really quickly here as we get into the nitty-gritty of it, ascendancies are going to be relatively powerful depending on the order in which you take them in. He's got a great section on explaining exactly which particular ascendancies you're going to want to take first, but overall at the end of the game, or at the end of all 4 labs, you're going to have Fast and Deadly, you're going to have Gathering Winds, and you're going to have Ricochet and Far Shot. The big argument here is whether or not you go Gathering Winds first, or if you push yourself all the way out to get Ricochet first, because your skills are going to chain an additional time, and projectiles deal 10% more damage as a multiplier for each remaining chain. That is a whole bunch when you consider you're getting 1 additional chain from Ricochet and 4 additional chains from Divide and Conquer. That's a bunch of additional multipliers depending on where it is the monster is getting hit and receiving damage in the sequence of chains for each and every Spectral shield throw that you throw out. There is a bunch of damage that's just free by playing Deadeye. Moving on over to the start of his tree, he's going to grab a whole bunch of defenses along the way down towards Point Blank. Yes, Point Blank did receive a bit of a nerf here in 3.9. Again, this is something that I credit Pimmalage for. He doesn't beat around the bush or pretend as though Point Blank wasn't nerfed. This is going to be a damage nerf. Nonetheless, it's still highly worth it for this build, and it's right along the way as you go over into the Duelist cluster and begin to pick up some more of your damage various nodes along with lots of different attack speed. Now, a highlight of this build that I enjoy because I'm simply obsessed with this passive node is Soul of Steel. Plus 1% to all maximum elemental resistances cannot be passed up. It is simply too good to pass up if you are anywhere close to it. And there's a whole bunch of life right here next to Bloodless. So if you can go down and get Soul of Steel, if you're anywhere close, you're going to have a nice wheel where you can pick up some life. And you're going to have a nice wheel where you're going to pick up some maximum all resistances. And you can see it's right along the spine of his build, so you might as well go grab it. He's going to move up and then take the rest of the Constitution Scion life wheel to fill out his life percentages. The life total that is on this particular build is 217% on the tree. So you heard me say earlier, this isn't the tankiest build of all time, but it's pretty tanky. There's actually a good amount of life that does get stacked onto this build. He's going to move all the way up to grab Elemental Overload because, of course, you'll have 40% more elemental damage if you've dealt a crit in the past 8 seconds. So we're not going to scale up Critical Strike Multiplier. We don't need it. We're converting all of, or the vast majority of, our damage from physical into cold, which gives us a whole bunch of damage. We don't need to scale crits. We'd rather just have that 40% more elemental damage as a continual uptick time by taking Elemental Overload. Other than that, he's going to grab some elemental damage nodes up in the top left of the tree, as well as some life to round out the rest of his particular defenses. Well, as we go back to his build and we take a look at his gems, here's his 6-link main setup. And here is the star of the show, Spectral Shield Throw. This is the description of the item if you've never read it before. Throws a spectral copy of your shield as a projectile, which cannot pierce, and deals offhand damage augmented by the defenses of the shield. This is why we're going to roll a shield with as much armor as possible on it. When it collides with something, it will shatter, launching a number of smaller shards as projectiles in all directions. Modifiers that cause additional projectiles to be fired will add more shards, not copies of the shield. This particular build is going to be looking, of course, to push as high as you can go with Spectral Shield Throw. going for that corrupted level 21. Nonetheless, you can see at the very bottom, this thing fires 13 additional projectiles when you get it to 21, 23, which is just ridiculous. It shows and really shines in all of the videos that Pimmalage shows off just how many projectiles get covered on the screen and the shatter effect. If you like playing builds that have shatter effect, this build is going to be for you. Namely because there's a lot of different options that you can have for it. You can go with Hypothermia. You, of course, can go with Herald of Ice. You, of course, are going to have Hatred. And then, of course, you're going to have Frost Bomb, which Frost Bomb is incredibly strong when you're going against bosses who regen. You'll notice on Frost Bomb, it says, creates a crystal that pulses with cold for a duration. Each pulse applies a debuff to nearby enemies for a secondary duration, which reduces life and energy shield regeneration rate. So here we are in 3.9 Metamorph League with a whole bunch of bosses and a whole bunch of annoying various regen mechanics. So why not bring a Frost Bomb along and stop all of that regen as much as possible while you are throwing as many shields as you can at the problem, namely the boss themselves. Lastly, for quality of life, he's got included an Ancestral Protector, which Ancestral Protector is actually a really strong buff effect for you. You can see that when the totem is placed, then you actually get 20% more attack speed while the totem is active. So stacking up a totem that is going to stick around for a while, especially when you're bossing, is going to be a very, very efficient way of ensuring that you are getting out as many shields, as many projectiles, and as many chains as possible to keep your highest amount of DPS going. Well, that is the particular build of the week, the Spectral Shield Throw Deadeye by Pimmalage. Of course, you can drop us a comment down below with your own versions of Spectral Shield Throw, if you've ever played Spectral Shield Throw, or what tips, tricks, or ideas that you would have if you were going to go in and design yourself a Spectral Shield Throw. Shout out once again to Pimmalage for putting together such a well-written guide and several different videos on this particular build. And I'm looking forward to giving this particular build a shot as soon as I can get together the opportunity as well as the Deadeye to the appropriate level to actually take on the various bosses and Atlas missions that are available in 3.9 with Spectral Shield Throw. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra falls for you right after you blow something up with an absolutely sick shield. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.